Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the channel. Appreciate you stopping by. Little impromptu video here. I was out running some errands, driving the roads here in Maine, and I got to thinking about something, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to share this with you guys and see what you think. Appreciate it. I'll just go ahead and get this out of the way. I appreciate it if you could hit that like button, consider subscribing if you haven't, click that notification bell so you get notified whenever I create new content. So, if you're old enough to remember, I'd like to see if you agree or can somewhat identify with what I'm going to say. If you're not old enough, then maybe, you're just taking it from my word and my perspective. Survival back in the 80s, I don't remember really hearing a whole lot the word preparedness. Never heard the word prepper. I don't like that term, but I use it because, that's what most people use. But back in the 80s, when I was into survival, and that's what it was largely called, survivalism, and if you were involved in preparedness and survival, you were a survivalist. And that term ended up really getting a stigma because the media started any Jim Bob that was out in the woods that had some guns and questioned anything that the government did. Well, they were a survivalist, a crazy survivalist. So that term changed. But anyways, back in the 80s, and I was a teenager back then, and I had an interest in survival. The biggest thing that I was concerned about was nuclear war. Back in the 80s, the Soviet Union, which largely is Russia now, and had some other countries that were in it, but the Soviet Union was, they were the bad guys, and the United States were the good guys. At least that's how it appeared. And back then, again, this is my perspective, somebody else's may be different, but there was an incredible amount of patriotism to the United States. Growing up, used to say the Pledge of Allegiance and sing the national anthem. Would take a lot of pride to, being an American. Back then, Germany was split into two countries. You had East Germany and West Germany. There was the Berlin Wall. And, it was good versus bad. Good versus evil. And the threat of nuclear war seemed very, very real. The Cuban Missile Crisis was just an incredible amount of tension. I didn't experience that, but, it was a sign of the times. And, I can remember watching documentaries, watching the news, and there was very often things about nuclear weapons, peace treaties, and, there was that threat that we could have a nuclear war, whether it was all out or limited, and then potentially face invasion. And as a teenager, it just seemed to make sense to me that you should prepare. That over in the Soviet Union, they had a massive civil defense program. They still do today. But they had a massive civil defense program with underground tunnels and shelters in their subway system to help protect citizens. And here in the United States, back in the 50s, there was a large civil defense program, but it had pretty much gone by the wayside by the time the 80s came around. I can remember going with my dad to some local civil defense offices in the early 80s and getting pamphlets that were from the 50s and 60s. It was crazy. That's how antiquated the information was. And, you know, I would talk to my dad. I would talk to my brother as I got a little bit older as a teenager about building a shelter, you know, fallout shelter, stocking up on supplies, stuff like that. And I may have been looked at as crazy, but I didn't realize it, you know, because people, they thought it was a possibility, you know, that there could be a nuclear war. You just never knew. Now, obviously, today we know that didn't happen. But survivalism in the 80s, when I look at that compared to preparedness today, was much simpler. And to me, it just made so much sense. It was so simple, where today it is just so complex. And I'll explain why a little bit. Back then, there were several magazines out, Survive magazine and then American Survival Guide, and maybe a couple of more. But, you know, they had articles talking about, you know, there were a lot of stuff in there about defensive tools and hunting, fishing, building primitive shelters, stocking up on supplies, maybe something on binoculars once in a while, camping gear. Not a whole lot with night vision, because that was a newer technology back then and very, very expensive. And certainly not as effective as they are today. Bug out bags, get home bags, stuff like that. You know, those were the kind of things that were in there. And then often there were, you know, articles about nuclear war survival. And there was an author who I actually wrote a letter to, and he wrote me a letter back. It was Dr. Bruce Clayton, who wrote a book, Life After Doomsday, very, very popular. Nice guy as well. I ended up emailing him years later. I think he's still around and actually teaches karate. But that was what you saw in the magazines, and when you went to prepare, you know, you just stocked up on extra food, and then frequently people would buy military surplus gear, which was very prevalent back then. Almost any decent-sized town had a military, an army surplus store. Hard to find that stuff today compared to back then. And I can remember going into these, you know, army surplus stores, and I'd get some, you know, gun oil and a pouch and, you know, maybe a little first aid kit, just different things. You know, I was a teenager, so I didn't have a whole lot of money. And military manuals. I'd buy some military manuals, pretty good price. And, you know, it was beans, bullets, and Band-Aids. That's really what it came down to. And if you had a tent, you know, some tarps, blankets, you know, things for the cold, you had some food, you had, you know, ways of defending yourself, that's it. That was survival. Now, I'm not saying, you know, you couldn't have a bomb shelter and all that stuff, and a big, you know, jacked up 4x4 as a vehicle. Yeah, you know, those things would happen. But if you look at today, everything is about spending money. You know, it's you got to have a unique gun for, oh, I just said gun. That's not a good thing. I should have said defensive tool. You got to have a defensive tool that serves every single possible purpose, which means you got to have 6 to 8 of them. And, you know, the optic on it has to cost double whatever the defensive tool costs. I mean, it's so much marketing and brainwashing that's going on, when the reality is you could really make do with 1 or 2 defensive tools, and that's it. So it was so much, I don't know, it was funner. Is that a word? Funner? Comment below, let me know. And it was just better. Simpler, less complex. You know, you had some Mountain House freeze-dried food and some dehydrated food, and then you had your food that you would just stock up on for the most part. And nowadays, there's a gazillion different companies out there, and, you know, it just makes everything complex. So, my point being, you know, I was just sitting there thinking back of survivalism back in the 80s. And I saw a video that Modern Refugee put out a few days ago on I can't remember what he called it, but it was some Alice gear. It was old-fashioned suspenders with a old army type belt, Alice belt, and a couple of AR mag pouches, a canteen holder. And again, and it reminded me back in the 80s that I was like, that's the gear that we used to have and we would talk about. And I was like, I'm going back to that. All of this modern stuff, you know, some of it's good, a lot of it's crap. And they just use marketing to convince people to spend money. And I started looking from his video where I could find all the components of what he had, because it's very similar to what I used to have and what I want to have again. And I'm going to convert over some of my kits to something like that. Anyways, good times. And I just thought I'd share this little story as I reminisce just survivalism in the 80s, back when the Ruskies looked like they were going to nuke the Americans, and there was going to be an invasion, and we were going to battle it out here on the mainland and have to kick them out of the country and save the United States of America. And there were some movies out there that were made based on that. The Day After was one. I don't know that I would recommend watching that. It was depressing. But that was a huge movie back then that woke up a lot of people to the horrors of nuclear war. But there are some other movies that were talking about World War III and potential battles. Book series that were out there. The Survivalist by Jerry Ahern was one that, was a little bit hokey, but man, it was good. It was really good. And they got it out on, like Audible, I think now. And, some other books, Nuclear War Survival Skills was a really good book. It was a nonfiction. Life After Doomsday I mentioned was really good. That's still very relevant today, in my opinion. And there was a government book that came out called The Effects of Nuclear Weapons, I believe. I think it was a Congress published study, and there was a chapter in there that talked about Charlottesville, Virginia, and what if there was a nuclear war, and it kind of narrated what would happen from the perspective of the citizens of Charlottesville, Virginia. I read that section several times. It's been a lot of years. I've gotten old. So, anyways, that's it. I appreciate you guys stopping by. I just wanted to share this few thoughts. Comment below any thoughts you got on this. You agree, disagree, have your own perspective or thoughts. Love to hear it. And that's it. You guys stay safe. Take care. We'll catch you later.
So I ran from the cities and the noise and lies, found a piece of ground under open skies. Hands in the dirt, sweat on my shirt, learning what living's really worth. While crooked men shake hands in rooms, selling souls to corporate suits. Society's sick, but I found the cure. A back road life, honest and pure. They can keep their throne and their golden news. This life out here's my modern exodus. I traded screens for a sunrise, callous palms, blisters, pride. Planted seeds where hope was.